Have you ever been stuck in an airport during a delay? You planned everything perfectly. You got your coffee, you got your window seat, and maybe you've even downloaded the next episode in your podcast. And then the dreaded announcement comes that your flight has been delayed. Hopefully only to like 20 minutes, but more realistically, like 17 million hours. And you sit and you wait and you refresh the online air app. You hope you get your coupon for Chick-fil-A so you can feed your kids. And somewhere in between the frustration and the exhaustion, you start to wonder, is this delay going to ruin everything? We're starting a new series called Staying Grounded, and not every delay is a setback. I had planned this when I thought maybe around this time in the year we might not have a candidate, and we might need to be like, what are you doing, God? Thankfully, we're ahead of schedule. So happy about that. But we've all had those moments where it feels like the universe is conspiring to slow us down. When you are at that red light and you're already 5 minutes late, that red light cannot change fast enough. You're in the express lane at the grocery store behind someone whose coupons aren't going through. You feel the physical rise in your chest, the irritation, the restlessness, the I don't have time for this energy. And what happens is, so the question is, what happens when that red light is more than 60 seconds? When that delay is a whole season, when it's a year, when it's a decade? In our culture, I think we're obsessed with a straight line approach to success. Maybe we believe that if we follow God, our life should look steady and upward in momentum. We may be moving at like 90 miles an hour towards our destiny. But the Bible often tells a different story, that in the kingdom of God, the path between 2 points is rarely a straight line. Often it is a winding one through the wilderness. And we're going to talk about wilderness this morning. And when I mean wilderness, I don't necessarily mean the geographical place of Spokane, Washington, and Eastern Washington. I think that I imagine more of a gap you feel between what is promised and what is reality. So for instance, it's the gap between the I do, but the happily ever after hasn't quite happened yet. Or you've started a business, but you haven't quite seen it sustain your family yet. Or the space where you feel like you're doing all the right things, but you're not getting the right results yet. And this is a core truth that we're going to lean into over the next couple weeks in Staying Grounded, where sometimes the most significant spiritual moments happen during life's pauses. And we tend to view delays as lost time, like we're falling behind or we're missing our window. But here's what I think. I think that God sometimes uses delays to reposition us for a different purpose. And yeah, that can be frustrating, but it does something to you. So this week, we're going to look at the story of Moses and the burning bush. And if you grew up in the church, you've probably heard this story a million times, but we're going to try to look at it with fresh eyes. And the invitation is simple, but it is difficult. It is slow down and pay attention. Most of us are so busy trying to get out of whatever chaos or wilderness that we're in that we never stop to see what God is doing in the middle of it. And so we're going to lean into this staying grounded when everything feels like it's in limbo, and we're going to learn how to find holy ground while we're waiting. So I want to set the scene for you. In this story, Moses is already 80 years old. Don't let the animated film fool you. He does not look that good at this point in his life. Sorry, if you're over 80, I'm sure you're doing fabulous. If you look at this timeline, his life has been split into two halves. 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in Midian as a shepherd. In Egypt, Moses was the man. He had the status, the education, the resources. He even had the right heart. He wanted to save his people. And when he was handled a certain situation using his own strength and his own temper and his own timing, it backfired. He wound up murdering an Egyptian guard, and he had to flee the country. And this is a significant shift in his life. In Exodus 2, we see Moses as a high man in status in Egypt who has attempted to take justice into his own hands. And we might do the same thing. I'm not saying we've all killed Egyptian guards. Hopefully you haven't. But when you feel a delay coming, your instincts kick in. You say, God isn't moving, so I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. And so you network more, or you hustle more, or you try to manipulate a situation to get the outcome that you want. But if we look at the cost, there's a very real possibility that you'll either burn out or just crash and burn. And so Moses' flight to the desert resulted in a 40-year period of isolation. This is not the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness after he's led the Israelites out. This was a whole first 40 years in the wilderness. His daily responsibilities changed from political leadership to manual labor. And so this delay served as a repositioning of Moses. It removed him from the structures of Egyptian power, placed him in an environment where he had to learn new skills, such as patience and navigating the desert. These are the very skills that he was going to later use with the Israelites. And so the point is that God is being described in the story as being willing to move you away from what you have built so he can show you what he is building instead. And it took 40 years, but God finally has Moses where he wants him. And so this is Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. It says, Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, saying, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. So in these verses, the Lord appears to Moses in a flame, in a fire, within a bush. And it's important to note that this happened on just an ordinary workday in Moses' life. He had likely spent thousands of days in this wilderness without any kind of experience like this ever happening before. And in verse 3, Moses sees the bush and he says, I need to check that out. That is interesting. And now I used to think that this was like a scene of like some grand grabbing of attention from God, like his own private drone or fireworks show saying, check this out, Moses. I have something for you. But actually, in the desert, it was probably common for bushes to just catch on fire from the heat, I would imagine. I'm not a desert expert, but it sounds hot. This bush was different, though. It was not being consumed. And what's noted here is that God has waited for Moses in the simple and the mundane and the silence of the desert to get his attention. And then God interrupts that silence. When God interrupts the silence, oftentimes we can look back and say, oh, that might have been a moment of preparation. That delay might have done something. So we look at Moses. Maybe Moses had to spend time in the back sands of the desert because he wasn't ready to hear God's voice yet. Most of us are so goal-oriented that if we passed a burning bush on the way to church today, we'd probably just call the fire department and say, can you please come handle that? We get caught up in the grind and the responsibility. But a delay can reveal a calling. A delay is rarely a period of inactivity. It is a period of different activity. Moses was not just waiting for 40 years, he was learning how to be a shepherd. This literal job was a prerequisite for his eventual calling. He learned the geography of the desert that he would later have to lead the Israelites in. He learned the patience required to manage a flock. He learned how to find water and food in a dry environment. So a delay reveals a calling by providing this specific training ground needed for your next assignment. And if Moses had entered his calling immediately after Egypt, I think he would have lacked the practical endurance and the knowledge of the terrain required to lead his people. I often say that one of the groups of people that I really have a hard time hanging out with is a bunch of young youth pastors. This is ironic because I used to be one. young and youth pastor. But what this is what bothers me is they'll get around. Sorry if you're like, I really want to be youth pastor one day. They'll get around and they'll hang out together and they'll be like, I'm so great. Look at all these programs I'm doing. I'm going to teach other youth pastors how to be youth pastors. I know this and this and this. I just want to be in a position of leadership where I can help train the next. And I go, you are 22 years old. Shut up. Like, you have not gone through it yet. And I do this because that used to be me. I wanted to be the grand youth pastor that had a podcast and a book series. And I learned over time that is not what God has made me to be. I learned that I am not a wonderer. Like, I can't get in a room with our staff and go, man, I wonder what it would be like if we did this and this and this. Those are qualities that I think Brandon has, that he's going to bring. He's going to give a great skill set to our church. I think it's needed in like a head leader. I don't have that. Naturally, I have the gift of discernment, where I can take your wondering and I can tell you everything that's wrong with it. Right? And I've had to learn that this is my role in life. So my point is, don't rush through your delay. If you are constantly checking your watch and going, when am I going to get there? Relentlessly seeking after your goals that you've outlined for yourself, it's very easy that you will never develop the eyes to see what God is doing right in front of you. And I gotta hand it to Gen Z for discovering something that they've called silent walking. And this is walking without technology. So you put your phone away and you go on a walk. If you've been around, you're like, that's just walking, man. Yeah, I know. So I'm a millennial and we got a lot of flack, so it's nice to give it to another generation. So Gen Z has been labeled the Christopher Columbus generation because they've discovered things that have already been discovered. So like Coke floats at McDonald's, or quiet quitting, which is basically just having a good work-life balance. Recently, they discovered Madonna. It's really exciting. The point is, when you stop rushing, you eliminate all the distractions, you have the moments where you see things more clearly. And what happens is then that the delays can be holy ground in disguise. The very place that you're currently frustrated with, that entry-level job, that season of singleness, that period of recovery, middle school and high school. It's the exact place where a bush might be burning. And if you keep waiting for the next thing and the best thing, God might be saying, hey, the ground that you're currently standing on is where I want to meet you. Verses 5 through 9 go like this. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians and bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, don't know this last one, and the Jebusites. And now the city of Israel has reached me. Now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So God commands Moses to remove his sandals as an act of grounding. You're standing on holy ground. And there's nothing necessarily special about taking off your feet. It doesn't make you holier. John Calvin, a very famous Reformed theologian, back in a long time ago, he wrote this. He says, not that nakedness of feet is of itself of any value in the worship of God, but because the weakness of men requires to be aided by helps of this kind, that they may better excite and prepare themselves for veneration. If you don't understand old theologian, let me translate it to this. Bare feet, no equal holy, right? Human brain, weak, distracted. Bare feet equals brain reset to focus. Physical help helps you pay attention. That's basically what's happening there. I'm here all week. I can translate any theologian for you. So when we get to verses 7 and 8, God explains that he has seen the misery of his people. He's heard their cries. He invites Moses to step into this and pay attention to what God is doing. Reset your brain. And while Moses was in the desert for 40 years, it might have seemed like God has forgotten about his people, about the Israelites. And this text confirms that God's observation has been constant. He's been aware of the suffering, and at the same time, he's been preparing Moses in the desert. The delay in Moses' life was synchronized with God's larger plan for national deliverance. And so verses 10 goes like this. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Okay, so he has his new purpose, that to answer the cry of his people and lead a rescue. And we see that the first thing that God asks of Moses in this new purpose is just his availability. In verse 10, God moves from the revelation of his character to a specific command. He says, now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. I need you to do this, Moses. And after 40 years of living as a fugitive and as a shepherd, Moses' immediate reaction to this is to protest. He asks, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? It's interesting because in his youth, if you remember, he was confident. He intervened in a fight and he killed a man. And now this delay has seemed to strip away all of that confidence. It's been replaced with an excuse. And maybe you can relate. You've had a delay. Maybe you think that you're now obsolete. You assume that because you've been out of action for a long time, you no longer are the right person for the task. But Moses used his current status as a shepherd as his reason to avoid future responsibility. And so we learn something else about delays in this story, is that delays expose our excuses. And Moses has 4 of them, and maybe you can resonate with some of them. The first is the who am I excuse. He has an erosion of identity. After 40 years in the wilderness, Moses' primary excuse was a lack of identity. In Egypt, he was tied to the status of being a prince, and in the wilderness, that status is gone. And the delay has exposed that he needed a specific title, maybe we need a certain title, a certain amount of money, or a high social standing to feel like we're useful. We tell ourselves, I can't lead this initiative because I'm just the middle manager. I didn't go to college. I can't help others because I'm still struggling myself. And that delay strips away all of the external credentials until we're forced to realize that our calling doesn't depend on our title. It depends on our calling from God. The second excuse that Moses gives is the what if excuse. There's a growth of fear in him. The long delays give the imagination time to construct worst case scenarios. In Exodus 4, Moses continues his excuses. He says, well, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? And when we're moving quickly and we're seeing results, we don't have much time for the what ifs. But in a delay, we become experts at anticipating the failure. We use the delay for an excuse for inaction, claiming we're just waiting for more clarity, or we're just waiting for this guaranteed success, or this easy road. And this exposes the fact that our real struggle isn't lack of information. It's a lack of trust. The delay reveals that we're more committed to our comfort than anything else. The third excuse that Moses gives is the I'm just not qualified excuse. And this is kind of similar to the who am I, but it's a focus on where he's in deficit, where he doesn't measure up. Moses eventually argues that he's not eloquent enough. He's slow of speech and tongue. It's likely that after 40 years of mostly speaking to sheep and his family, his communication skills have probably atrophied. Delays expose our perceived inadequacy. We look at the time that has passed and we think, oh, I've been out of the game for too long. The world has passed me by. And we focus on these deficits. And this excuse is actually a form of pride because it assumes that God's ability to work is limited to our natural abilities. And this delay brings all this to the surface so we can see that we're putting more faith in our own weakness than in God's strength. And the fourth excuse that Moses gives is the send someone else excuse. And it's a desire for safety. Finally, Moses says, pardon me, my Lord, but if you would please send someone else, that would be fantastic. Sometimes a delay is so long, it becomes so comfortable to stop. And you don't want to leave. The wilderness is the new normal. It exposes the excuse that we have of being complacent. We claim that we aren't ready, but the truth is we just don't want to deal with something new. We prefer the predictable silence over the unpredictable challenge in the new calling. And so a delay reveals whether we actually want to fulfill our purpose or if we just want to be left alone. So in summary, God allows all of these excuses to come up, not to shame us, but to point them out and to heal us. By exposing our excuses, this delay forces us to confront the fact that we've been relying on ourselves for too much. And once those excuses are out in the open, God can replace those excuses, those who am I excuses, with the I will be with you promise. It is significant that God does not address Moses' insecurity with a compliment. It's not like Moses says, I'm not a good speaker. And God's like, oh, no, you are. He's like, actually, I'll be with you, Moses. He doesn't tell Moses that he's talented or experienced or capable. In verse 12, he just gives a simple promise. I will be with you. And this shifts the focus of a primary lesson in the wilderness. The delay is intended to move us from being self-reliant to being reliant on God. Moses' qualifications were irrelevant because the success of the mission depended entirely on God being in it. And so a delay helps us confront the lies that we believe about our adequacy. When we're forced to wait, we eventually realize that we reach the end of our resources. It is only then that we realize that we cannot do the work on our own strength, and we truly need to be used by God. So fast forward a few generations in the Bible, and we get to some stuff that King David wrote in the Psalms. And in Psalm 27, he writes this whole song about how God has been at work and how he's depending on God. And he finishes Psalm 27 with verse 14 that says, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. David wasn't a stranger to delays either. He was anointed king as a teenager, but didn't get to be king until he was older. And in that in-between, he learned how to wait and wait well. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means that the next right thing you need to do while trusting God that he's still moving. While Moses was shepherding sheep, God was shaping a leader. While David was hiding in caves, God was building a king. And while you're staying grounded in the wilderness, God is not asleep. Delays prepare us for what's next. God is being more patient than you expected. And so it's easy to focus on the duration of the wait, like, oh Lord, how much longer, rather than the purpose of the wait. We learn that God is refining you in the delay by showing you patterns of behavior you thought you needed, but you need to change. And for Moses, this likely included his temper and his tendency to act impulsively. By the time he left the wilderness, he was described as the most humble man on earth, as we learn in Numbers. That humility was a direct result, I think, of that 40-year delay in the desert. And so we need to learn what God is teaching because he has a pattern of having you apply those lessons one day. If you remember the movie Karate Kid, or Gen Z, go discover Karate Kid, is a great story of a master teaching his student the most basic, pointless things in the moment. Wax on, wax off, like paint the fence, sand the floor. And Ralph Macchio is like, I don't get this at all. What is the point? And you don't realize later on in the story that he's been teaching him just the fundamentals of karate that he can use in combat. And the moment that it all clicks for him, like, oh, I've been learning this whole time, is really great. So 2 things as I close. Remember, God is never in a hurry. And that's frustrating to no ends. And it drives me crazy. But his timeline seems to be based on our readiness and a purpose. And we're encouraged to let these wilderness seasons of our lives become something sacred. It means acknowledging that the delay you find yourself in right now is not a waste of time, but it's a necessary part of your formation. So I have 3 questions for you. The first is for your head In what area of your life do you feel delayed or stuck in right now? The second is for your heart. What is the biggest fear or excuse that surfaces when you think about God using you in this season? And number 3 is for your hands. What is one ordinary task that you can do this week with more attention as if it were holy ground?